Communication involves signaling information to a recipient to modify their behavior within their habitat. Communications can be honest or deceptive, and natural selection can favor detection and avoidance or punishing of liars. Specifically, communication is any process in which a signal from one individual modifies the behavior of a recipient individual. A signal is any information containing behavior or characteristic. Communication is a crucial component of animal behavior. It creates a stimulus that elicits a response. By definition, communication is a social process. For communication to occur, it is not enough that a signal is sent. The signal must be received and acted upon. Honeybees live socially in hives where a queen lays eggs that are tended by workers. Besides caring for young, building, and maintaining the hive, workers procure food for members of the colony by gathering nectar and pollen from flowering plants. Bees recruit hive mates to food sources, so more bees begin showing up to a food source when only discovered by a few. This observation inspired the hypothesis that food finders have some way of communicating the location of food to others. In the 1930s, Carl von Frisch studied bees that built hives inside the glass-walled chambers he had constructed. He found that if he placed a feeder containing sugar water near one of these observation hives, a few of the workers began moving in a circular pattern on the vertical interior wall of the hive. Von Frisch called these movements the round dance. Other workers appeared to follow the progress of the dance, first by touching the displaying bee as it danced, and then by flying away from the hive in search of the food source. To investigate the function of these movements further, von Frisch placed feeders containing sugar water at progressively greater distances from the hive. Using this technique, he was able to get bees to visit feeders at a distance of several kilometers from the hive. By catching bees at the feeders and dabbing them with paint, he could individually mark successful food finders. Follow-up observations at the hive confirmed that marked foragers danced when they returned to the hive. They returned to the food source with unmarked bees as well. To explain these data, von Frisch proposed that the round dance contained information about the location of that food. Since beehives are completely dark, he hypothesized that workers got information from the dance by touching the dancer and following the dancer's movements. Placing feeders at longer distances from the hive, he found that successful food finders used a new type of display. He named these movements the waggle dance. They combined circular movements like those of the round dance with short, straight runs. During these runs, the dancing bee vigorously moved her abdomen from side to side. These observations supported the hypothesis that both the round dance and waggle dance communicate information about food sources. Recent work has shown that the round and waggle dances are actually the same type of behavior. Round dances just have short waggle phases. 3 key observations allowed von Frisch to push our understanding of bee language further. The orientation of the waggle part of the dance varied. The direction of the waggle run correlated with the direction of the food source from the hive. The length of the straight waggling run was proportional to the distance the foragers had to fly to reach the feeder. By varying the location of the food source and observing the orientation of the waggle dance given by marked workers, von Frisch was able to confirm that dancing bees were communicating the position of the food relative to the current position of the sun. The direction of a food source is encoded in the angle between the waggle line and an imaginary vertical line running along the hive. The distance is also encoded in the length of the waggle line. In this case, the waggle line is 90 degrees to the left, meaning other bees can locate the food by facing towards the sun, then turning 90 degrees to the left and traveling the approximate distance specified by the length of the waggle. In another case, a bee might locate food 60 degrees to the right of the sun. It would represent this by waggling 60 degrees right from the vertical. At the ultimate level, there's a hypothesis for why honeybees use this method of communication about food sources. If more workers find a food source quickly, the total resources harvested and number of offspring produced should increase. So the frequency of bee colonies with successful communication should increase over time. One of the most general observations about communication is that the type of signal used by an organism correlates with its habitat. Bees, ants, and termites that live in hives or underground rely on olfactory and tactile communication. Similarly, bats, wolves, and other animals that are active at night communicate via sound or scent. In contrast, animals that are active during the day and that live in open or treeless habitats tend to rely on visual communication. Sound travels much farther than light in aquatic habitats. Based on this observation, it makes sense that humpback whales rely on songs for long-distance communication. In some cases, humpback whale songs can travel hundreds of kilometers. Groups of whales use acoustic communication to stay together during migrations, and males sing to attract mates. Each mode of communication has advantages and disadvantages. Songs can carry information over long distances, but they have to be repeated to be effective, and frequent repetition requires a large expenditure of time and energy. In addition, acoustic communication attracts predators. Although there are costs, communication systems have been honed by natural selection to optimize their cost-benefit ratio. At the ultimate level, one of the questions that biologists ask about communication is whether the signal is reliable. As far as we know, honeybee dances consistently tell the truth about the location of food sources. This makes sense. The honeybees that occupy a hive are closely related and cooperate extensively in the rearing of offspring. Contributing to the hive's survival is equivalent to promoting their own individual survival. So it is advantageous for an individual to convey information accurately. If a food finder provided inaccurate or misleading information to its hive mates, fewer offspring would be reared and the food finder's fitness would be reduced. But in some cases, natural selection has favored the evolution of deceitful communication. Many of the best studied instances involve prey deceiving predators or predators deceiving prey. Remember the hog-nosed snakes that are famous for the deceptive communication that they are dead by theatrically playing dead. When perturbed, a predator hog-nosed snake turns its belly up, producing a foul odor and hanging their tongues out of their mouth, and may even produce a couple drops of blood from their mouths as well. If turned back on their bellies, they quickly flip back onto their backs again and sustain the charade until the coast is clear. They're really great liars. Male and female fireflies flash a species-specific signal to each other during courtship. Predatory photurus fireflies can mimic the pattern of flashes given by females of several other species. When a photurus female attracts a male of a different species with the appropriate set of flashes, she then attacks and eats him. These individuals increase their fitness by providing inaccurate or misleading information to members of a different species. There is no evidence that the signaler is consciously lying. Natural selection has simply favored certain stereotyped behavioral traits and instincts that effectively communicate deceitful information. In some cases, natural selection has favored the evolution of traits or actions that deceive members of an organism's own species. Perhaps the best studied type of deceit in non-human animals involves the mating system of bluegill sunfish. Some males mimic females in an extremely elaborate and sneaky attempt to reproduce. They look almost identical to females and behave the same way also. The territory-owning male appears to tolerate the mimic, courting the female and the mimic, perhaps unaware of the charade. When the female lays eggs, the mimic releases sperm, fertilizing some of the real female's eggs, and then the mimic darts away. The mimic ends up fathering offspring but does not have to devote any of his own energy or resources to caring for them. In addition, mimics do not have to expend energy growing large or making and defending a nest. But if all males were mimics, the strategy wouldn't work for any of them. As the number of mimics increases, the reproductive success of mimics declines. This is a common observation in studies of deceitful communication. Cheating works. It works best within a population where it is relatively rare. Of course, in this case, if there weren't any honest males to court the females, there wouldn't be any opportunity for a mimic to sneak in and fertilize the eggs. Therefore, it's generally the case that if deceit becomes extremely common, the natural selection will strongly favor individuals that can detect and avoid or punish liars. But if liars are rare, the natural selection will instead favor individuals that are more gullible. Even if they are occasionally fooled, trusting signals is still in their favor because the benefits of mating are so high and liars are so rare. This is an example of frequency-dependent selection.